Good morning, everyone. We are blessed to be here today, and we have an incredible guest joining us today. Marshall Jones is in the house, the founder of MindBody Speaks, and obviously that's right up my alley. And it's funny because Marshall, welcome to Office Hours, but I had a, a, a guest, Major. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, and he talks about vibration, a famous musical artist, and talks about vibration and sound as a healing influence. And you're the author of Tonal Influence, which is a guide to listening better, speak clearer, and set the tone. I was wondering how much of tonal influence is actually math or frequency more than just the pragmatic abilities to listen better, speak clearer, and setting a tone.
Man, yes. So the idea of the human voice, there is a mathematical equation that we're looking at because there are frequencies in the human voice that are more alarming, and they're based on the frequencies that the human ear pays attention to. So one of them is particularly the 3,000 hertz area. And that's the frequency of the human scream. It's also the frequency of a baby cry. And when people have those frequencies in their voice, they sound more alarmed and like there's more of a problem. And where's the fire is the question that people will ask. And, when you have more of those tones brought up in your voice, it sends signals out. And so no matter what you're saying, people are listening for the problem, like what's going on with you. And what we want to do is we want to reduce the alarm frequencies in the voice and bring more calming frequencies in your voice. And so, yeah, the mathematical equation for that is definitely at the forefront of the work.
And looking at it, you will attract people. I always say your frequency is your neighborhood. So if you have these different, if you're the theta megahertz, or different brain waves are tuning in like a radio to what you say. And so if you have a tone that puts people at ease, you're going to have more of a flow in that relationship than a tone that creates dis-ease. And it's interesting, how does it affect the way that we listen, though? I totally understand the way that we speak clearer and we set a tone or a vibration or frequency, but I found it extremely interesting that it's also a guide to listening better.
So it's a two-way street. The way that there's something that I call the speaker's voice and the listener's voice. So the speaker's voice, that we talk about like that 3,000 hertz, right? But the speaker's voice is a voice that when you hear those frequencies in my tone, I am talking and it's very clear that there's really no space for you. But the listener's voice is a voice where I'm speaking here with you, but there's space for you. And you can kind of sense that there's space for you to respond, and I would be willing to hear you respond. And these subtleties can be picked up in one's communication. And so when we have a tone that says, hey, there's a lane for you, others can hear that, they can sense that. There's so many little subtle things that are going on in the body. Or another example is, let's say I'm talking, but I'm kind of paying attention to something else. And even though I'm looking at you right now, I'm paying attention to something around me. You can probably hear distraction in my voice, and you'd be like, what is he listening to? Because it doesn't sound like he's here with me. These subtleties are detectable, and we are much more capable of hearing them than we give ourselves credit for. And so, when you're listening to someone and you're giving them your auditory attention, we can tell.
Yeah, and there's a feeling that is connected to that as well. And I talk about a lot, hey, people aren't going to remember. I like to drop a lot of nuggets when I speak, and it's like drinking through a fire hose. I know it is because I've done the work over 35 years, and I know the complexity of some of the critical business issues or life or spiritual or just perspective things that I'm teaching. But that idea of keeping people connected so that when they leave, although they may not remember one takeaway, and I've tested this, and I'm sure you have as well with the amount of speaking that you do, and you're like, man, you were the best speaker ever. I love you. Really, what was your favorite takeaway? You know, it's almost hilarious, but they love the way they feel. And,
Mm.
how does what we say and how we say it make people feel differently?
So if I want to, excite someone, the excitatory energy in our vocalization can give that to them. And, there's the sound bath of what's being communicated and being transmitted is really hitting people on multiple levels. If you look at the like voice analysis data, which is just taking the entire frequency of the voice and you can see it, there's tones and there's overtones. And there's literally like layers upon layers of 0 hertz to 20,000. And when you're speaking, you're hitting the person with all of those frequencies at once, but just at different intensities. And so sometimes you are communicating on the level of the words. Then there's the level of the tone behind those words, which in like any conversation you can have, people are like, why did you say that this way or not? But they feel and they sense. And so let's say I give a bunch of information that's a lot to take in. Sure, it may be, but on an auditory level, on a frequency level, on a sonic level, they've been touched. And so they will metabolize that information a bit later. And yeah, sure, you may not have understood everything I said or grasped every word and put it all together right now. But the fact that you're not alarmed because I gave you a tone which was acceptable to you, it gives you space versus, let's just say, maybe you're super excited as a speaker and you're kind of hoping that they get everything and I have all this information for you and so on and so on and so on. It's all these nuggets of wisdom. Most likely you're scrambling the other person's brain so they feel something that wouldn't allow them to collect that data. So the way that you communicate in the calm and the comfort with your material, the sense of rootedness that you have about what you're saying, that also affects the long-term effect of how you come across.
And one of the things that you utilize extremely well is cadence.
Mm.
And so we have intonation, connotation, but a lot of people don't utilize the cadence like you do to create, as you said, the space. What impact does cadence have on the tonal influence?
They say things like marching to the beat of one's own drum, and we recognize that in people when the rhythm of how we're saying things, you're comfortable with it. That becomes, there's this saying, they say, music is the silence between the notes. So a lot of times we think about, well, as long as we're transmitting signal, like then that's where the information, or that's where it's happening. But the space and rhythm with which that's coming across, do you drone on and have a certain, when they say monotone, it's actually not monotone. That's a misnomer. It's monorhythm. That's like, oh my God, if this person does not change the rhythm of what they're saying, I'm going to go to sleep. And so you want to be able to give the sense that like, hey, we're dancing. When the rhythm moves around a bit, it's like at any given time, maybe there's a response here, and I'm leaving space to respond. And I'm cool and I'm calm. I'm not threatened by the fact there's an audience here. And, you know, that gives a nice musicality to what you're saying.
And finally, understanding the tonal influence
Mm.
obviously brings inspiration, motivation, confidence. confidence, influence. But one of the things, as you look at your tone as an instrument,
Mm,
you also note that it assists in growth.
mm.
And so I was curious, how does our tonal influence help people grow?
We spend in our development, the first thing that becomes apparent to us before words, we spend, we're able to detect tone at about 2 months old, 4 months old. We're able to determine the differences between the emotions. We don't really start to play with words as much until about 18 months. So if you look at this, right, this is like this lifetime that your nervous system has acquainted itself to tone. And that tone has oriented your attention and your focus on things. And so your capacity to monitor and utilize your voice as an instrument bypasses the part of the brain that rationalizes with words. And it gets deep under there into their system. And you start to pull at things that are pre language. And that's the power of it, is that you're getting to a pre linguistic level with people. And if you can create tones that, especially if you have people who are alarmed or who have been over alerted by a lifetime of experiences, or the way that they were raised, or the way that they were spoken to when they grew up, if you come in as a change agent, a thought leader, if you're able to speak to them in tones that are associated with calm and comfort and like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, you might have had some trouble in your life, but it's okay. You can make it. Might have had some things that were going wrong, but it's okay. We can do this. You're penetrating them in that sense of getting right in there with your voice. That's where the magic begins to happen if you're going to use that word.
Which is probably why you're one of the leaders in helping with youth development all the way to law enforcement, because we do not want to exacerbate situations with alarming frequencies or accelerate people in the wrong directions. There's a saying in the speaking world, it's not what you say, it's what they hear.
Mhm.
And there's a lot to what people hear and a lot to why they hear it. And tonal influence is absolutely one of the key components of what people hear. Check out Tonal Influence. It's a guide to listen better, speak clearer. You can set the tone, which Marshall Davis Jones is doing for all of us. Thank you so much for your incredible work. We look forward to having you again on different shows of our More People Need to Understand, also the quantum side of frequency and vibration, which actually allows things to resonate or raises intelligent intuition and inspiration, the three components of tonality. Marshall, thanks again for joining us.
All right, now, thank you for having me, David.
Thank you, man. We'll have you back. Great interview. There's some incredible insight on how we communicate and how we can communicate effectively and efficiently. Speaking of great communicators, our next guest coming on, he's like family now to me, the incredible Robert Gill with Epic Financial and the Epic Financial Strategy King. He's my guy to help me understand building wealth, a legacy, and many more things that are connected to financial security. Rob, welcome to Office Hours.
Dave, it's always an honor. I love when I get a call and saying, hey, can you jump on in 7 minutes? And I've learned always to say yes. I love saying yes to David Meltzer. One of the greatest yeses I said was about 14 months ago when I first had the good fortune of being interviewed on TikTok by you. And something that's been great ever since.
Yeah, it's just a fabulous relationship that we have. I was thinking about financial security,
Mm,
and when I lost everything, uh, I'm a more interested than interesting person. I wanted to figure out uh, and be accountable for what I did and what I was supposed to learn, so that
mm,
it wouldn't happen to me, and then I could teach others, so it wouldn't happen to them. Especially because I was running the most notable sports agency in the world, and here I felt like not only a loser but a hypocrite, that I was supposed to be teaching the young athletes to keep their money and build a legacy, and I'd ruined my legacy, and I wanted to be accountable for that. Bob Proctor, who has passed, was one of my first mentors, and one of the pieces of advice that he gave me as I went down to explore how to create a financial legacy is he said, David, save $2 million. He said, your decisions will be different if you have $2 million in the bank. They'll be better. And I didn't understand that until recently, looking backwards at the decision I make of what financial legacy creates for you in the realm of secure decision making, not fearful, scarce decision making. That's much easier to understand patience, longevity, exponentiality of growth with income when you have some money. How have you learned and articulated this idea? And it doesn't have to be $2 million, but the idea that we make decisions differently when we're financially secure. That's the lesson that I learned.
Wow. So, what a great question. And I think that, if I look at, first of all, your story, which I've heard directly, and then I've also been
About
able to
100
hear,
times.
yeah, which I love. I love hearing it. But what stands out the most when I think of you, and I think of when you first got out of law school and the first couple of jobs you had basically paid for everything and you saved all that money. You always talk about all the money you saved up. And, here's what I suspect happened. And you and I have never had this conversation, but I suspect that as you were on the come up and then, achieving the success and you bought the house, and you're like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't deserve it. The whole financial temperature thing. I think that as you were leveraging your real estate strategies, it became, an addiction, right? It became that leverage play. And in our minds, it's like, no, 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 this is how we go to 200 or 300 or 400 million. And somewhere you forgot that that liftoff point was all that money you saved when you first started this, 10 years before that, let's say, in the mid 90s to the late 90s, when you were on the cutting edge of everything. By the way, just like you're on the cutting edge of everything right now in 2023, that's evident. You're talking this compounding of energy and quantum, and my head just starts, I'm just like, I'm on vacation right now, so I'm looking out right at the Atlantic Ocean, and I'm like, yep, I'm right where it's supposed to be. You starting to get crazy with the quantum physics, and I'm just listening as best as I can. So I think that what you're telling me is that 2 million is your non-negotiable, right? And being that it's your non-negotiable, that's your baseline of all your decision making. That's off of that, which is now going to be based on logic, math, and science. There'll be a little bit of an emotional decision behind it, but the majority of it, the emotion moves us. But I think that you're logically going to go through what you have to go through to make any kind of investment decision going forward. And to each and every person on the call, it's all relative. It's got to be based on, all right, what is your non-negotiable? What does that number look like? Why is that your number? And then off of that, the goal is to never touch that as you're playing into the other spaces of what you want to do. If you're going to leverage it, make sure you do it the right way, meaning you don't want to leverage real estate off of real estate because it could go down. But one of the things, as you know, David, that we love to leverage is cash value life insurance because it's a guarantee. Right. So I think that's a phenomenal question. Thank you. And I do believe that financial scarcity is a real pandemic. I think it's either handed down or even situations where people lose a whole lot of money or some kind of money, they get scared to step back in going forward because they haven't addressed whatever that was or whatever that fear was. And I think money is about psychology just as much as it is about earning it and deploying it properly. And if you can get right with yourself within, understand what your core values are, understand what moves you in a non-greed mindset, but more in a mindset of giving and contributing and being able to put yourself in a position to prosper, I think that's what it's all about. Can you hear me okay, by the way? I just want to make sure you can hear
You're
me.
good.
Okay.
And it's interesting. I have a new concept. One of the reasons I'm excited to have you on, I wanted to throw this to you impromptu because I love getting people their initial reactions. One of the things that I'm studying is something called invisible assumptions. And these invisible assumptions in the financial world can make or break you. And I still, when I make some critical business decisions or financial decisions, I still misread the invisible assumptions. And one of the invisible assumptions in the financial world, no matter how secure and how guaranteed an investment is, a treasury bond,
Yep.
that there are invisible assumptions that we take and make, uh, like the person representing
Mm.
the guaranteed investment.
Yep.
And I'll give you an example where I usually fall into trouble is I will have a family member or a close
Mm.
friend, and I will overlook an invisible assumption that this person is trustworthy because they're a family member or a friend. And then I'll blame them when something is miscommunicated or misrepresented, even. And I would say the biggest losses financially in my career have been off of that invisible assumption. And I still make that invisible assumption to this day. I will look
Mm.
back and say, okay, this did not turn out the way I wanted because I just made the assumption that I could trust this person, what they represented or miscommunicated to me. I also want to bring in, because he woke up early to be here, our friends here. So good morning, buddy.
Good morning, and I apologize. I had it down as 6 a.m. my time here. I've
figure.
been
I'm sorry.
traveling all week, so
Yeah, no problem. But
wrong calendar.
You missed out. I'm going to introduce you to Marshall Davis Jones because he needs to go on your show. He talked about the power of tonality, and it was a quantum conversation about vibration and frequency, intonation, connotation, and cadence. So I will make the introduction to Marshall as well. In fact, he's here. Comb your hair, Marshall. There we go.
Hey, buddy.
Not everybody has a hat like Blaine, but anyway, we were talking about invisible assumptions. I'm going to keep everybody in here. We'll go around the horn real quick. So, Rob, you see it probably more than anyone when you review, because I know you take like 6 meetings to see where people are at financially.
Yeah.
How important is it in critical decision making? You'll get decision exhaustion if you look for invisible assumptions in like what we eat for lunch. You're going to get exhausted. But on big decisions, how important is it, and what are some of the assumptions people make that get them into big trouble financially?
Well, to your point, if it's somebody that is close proximity is power, that all of a sudden you're going to take assumptions that you don't have to normally do if it was someone you didn't know, right? So, for me, I'll always say, who's your top 5 or who's your financial educators that hold each other accountable. So one of the things that we do is we build out personal websites for each person that we do business with, personal financial websites, so all their data is on one landing page, including their accountant, including their fiduciary, including their trust officer. And in that space, we'll either give that to everybody, or if you're like, Rob, I need you to work on my fiduciary, we'll all be on that same landing page, and that holds everybody accountable for your benefit. If somebody doesn't want to be on that page, it's because they don't want to be held accountable. So a good way to be able to do that is, okay, let's say if it's your cousin Marcus. All right, Marcus, this is great. Let me just run this through the rest of the team and see what they say. That's how you could prevent that feeling of emotion a year later that you had been had because it was a family member. And now all of a sudden you put yourself in a position to make the right decision because it's based on logic, math, and science, not emotional timidity.
Amazing. And Blaine, you have the most experience of everyone here, and I'm sure you have been hit on the side and then in the front and in the back by invisible assumptions. What are some of the mechanisms, since you do coaching around the world with the biggest leaders in the world, what are some of the mechanisms or strategies we can use to figure out if we're making an invisible assumption that would have a detrimental outcome to a major decision?
That's a great question. There's 2 pieces that come to mind for me. One is something just as simple as questions, and I do mean as simple as questions. It almost seems simplistic when I say it, but even if it's somebody that I know really well, I want to be able to ask the same kinds of questions of somebody that I wouldn't know as well. And there's this, and Marshall, you'll probably kind of resonate with this, but I've done this long enough that there's a resonance in the answer. And if I know them really well and there's something in the answer that they give me that seems to be a little off, what that tells me is that I'm paying attention to the background of the obvious, those those unvoiced assumptions, because that wouldn't be there. That little that was a little odd, or you didn't quite jump into that answer. It was almost a drive-by sort of an answer. So I think those two things in concert. Yeah. And it kind of goes to the notion, in something that I speak about a lot in the work that I do with executives, is that almost everybody's an accidental communicator. Very few people have taken the time to learn to master the art and the process of communicating. And it kind of comes, literally comes down. Virginia Satir said, that communication is simply the ways, plural, that we work out common meaning with one another. And that common meaning lies in experience. The experience of I've got a solid base here to work from. So,
Marshall, I brought Blaine in to pitch you up a big ass softball to hit out of the park. So, I would love for you to jump on to the train here and how you view it, especially considering tonal influence in the invisible assumption arena.
So you can hear things based on proximity, right? And so one of the things that happens is we have, like, I call it, you have your 4 circles, your 4 zones of influence. And the closer you are to the center, the hotter things are. There's a quickening, right? And the distance that things have, it's a bit cooler at the edges. You ever take a bowl of oatmeal, you take it and cool it off at the edges there, right? And so what happens is you can hear certainty and uncertainty. You can hear, if you ask someone a question, the connection between whether or not they feel real close to it or not, feel sure about it or not, all of those little cues, and we ignore them. We will ignore them. Like, that you heard, like, and the thing is that you don't want to address it, because what happens is that people like to believe that they're getting over. People like to believe that if they said something to you that wasn't true, that you believed it. And what you want to be able to do is say, with the Black Swan group, they have this thing called labeling, right? So like they'll say something like, oh, it sounds like, or it seems like. And if you want to address what you're picking up on, you want to give them the permission to like, I'm going to ignore that directly. And I'll say, hey, it sounds like you're a little unsure about this. Or it sounds like there's something that you might be concerned about. Or is there something that I'm missing? And you steer the person towards integrity and honesty, because people want to do that willingly. If you come in and it's like, oh, you're lying to me right now, I can tell you're full of it. They're like, whoa, walls, 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 walls. And now you have denial. But if you can say, Columbo is one of my favorite shows. I loved Columbo, man. You already knew. He always do his thing. He's like, it just, where he's not letting the person know, I got you figured out, man. I got you pegged. He's like, I'm just trying to work this out in my mind. And maybe the perpetrator will come to their own senses and confess, or maybe not. But when people feel like they can open the own door to their integrity and honesty, they are more available to you. And so if you can listen for the signs of land, steer them along with comfort, guidance, and assurity, and you're telling to do that.
And at a higher level, even without the specifics of, this question of, it sounds like, or you may not be, so that in the end, questioning is a form of vetting, but without attacking, right? Curiosity is a calming tonality of vetting and being curious of what is true and what isn't true. Doesn't have to be attacking in its nature, where even in the context of someone in the tonality that they ask, you could say, no, something seems amiss here. Could you explain that further? Because I'm not that bright compared to, that doesn't sound right.
Right.
And I want to point that out because you're the expert of tonality. To finish up, I'd love, because we had kind of a disjointed show today, I'm a huge takeaway person. And Marshall and I talked about this. It's remarkable to sit on stage for an hour and a half, and people will literally come up and tell you you've changed their life, best speech they've ever heard. And out of curiosity, not, trying to vet them, I'm literally like, really, like, what was the number one takeaway that you had? And they're like, but it was the way that they felt that made them say that. And I planted seeds probably under trees that would grow later on in their life, as Marshall indicated as well. So I would love for you guys, as it's a vacationing, a very interesting week here at the end of July, where people are all over the places. I know Rob is at the ocean, and Blaine and I have been traveling all over the world. And Marshall, I'm just assuming your experience, at least with people around you, not a normal cadence of habitual behaviors. I was wondering what your takeaways were for the week. If you could look back on the week and say, here's the number one thing that I took away this week for my life. And I'll start with you, Rob, and work our way back around the horn, not to steal from ESPN.
Yeah. So real fast, I think that, first of all, Marshall, thank you for sharing that, because in the curiosity of a question where I put my shoulder up and my head to the side with a different tone in my voice, it's much less invasive than saying, what are you talking about? You're wrong. You got to tell me the truth. Because that's more like a parent talking to a child, right? So it brings a person back to parts of their life that they don't even want to address. Love that. Thank you so much. It's interesting, Dave, for me this week, everyone sleeps till like 9 or 10. So I get so much work done in the morning that I've been able to handle like points of contact. And I guess I could say I've been shrinking some days, or turning some months into days right now, or weeks into mornings. And I'm in a different like speed right now, and it seems a little bit more like, I'll use the word quantum, because that's the word of the day. I feel like I'm on a different plane as I'm working through each day right now, and I'm here till next Monday, so that's kind of cool. And for me, I always want to focus on gratitude and fulfillment. I am feeling that in a certain way right now. And just reflecting on the AAU basketball team that we did over the last 120 days, which has been an incredible journey, seeing these kids and learning the business side of it in the middle of all the other stuff I do. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And then when I got your call today, it's always a great opportunity to spend some time with some really tremendous folks.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Yeah. I spent most of this week working with a client, two large organizations, about $1.5 billion each, coming together, and I was working with their board. And then one of the executive teams, I'm going back next week to work with the other executive team as we kind of look at integration questions. So with that backdrop, what the takeaway is this week is, and this isn't a new aha to me, but it was really rich this week. I wasn't just working with in the case of the board, with the 12 people that were in the room. I was working with 10,000 people, because that's the number of people that these two organizations actually represent from an employee base. So anything that I did was in service of the 10,000. I was speaking to the 10, but the 10,000 was really where I was actually directing my attention. And that it's interesting because it changes the tone and tenor of how I listen, and what is it that they're listening for in what it is that I'm presenting. So just calibrating that, rather than just looking at an agenda that straw man agenda that I put together, going, well, I think we could probably usefully talk about this or explore this. It was kind of like, nah, let's see what emerges here. What needs to be heard so that it can be spoken to, because it's going to be representative of something that 10,000 people are going to be resonating with.
Beautiful. Our newest friend.
Man, you know, I can appreciate that. I saw this video a few days ago, and they're trying to figure this out. These scientists were like, if you take a bubble and you connect it to another bubble,
Yeah.
it creates this like geometric shape, very specific. And then as more bubbles are added to the bubbles, the geometric shape, there's a continuity to it. And there's this sense of like everyone, quote unquote, is in their own bubble. But when we communicate with each other and our bubbles collide, there's something else that takes shape in the center. So to the point of like, what is it like to wake up early in the morning and when other minds are asleep and I'm awake listening to Robert? What is it like to think about 10,000 people who are being affected because I'm talking to you, but your bubble's connected to all of these other things, and there's something that's taking shape, and I'm paying attention to that. And the thing that's been the most important this week, particularly, has been the adequate capacity to set boundaries. Because when you're able to do that, when you yourself are able to set boundaries, you're able to allow or disallow other things to connect the way you want them to, and they take shape the way you want them to. And so it's just amazing that no matter what, we're all here in this big bubble together. And however we take shape based on the people we resonate with and connect to, that as long as we're clear about our field, we can then engage with others meaningfully and purposefully. And so, yeah, man, like that video of bubbles just seemed to open up my perspective of what it is that I'm really attempting to communicate and train other people on. But like, what does it mean to be here with each other?
We're going to have a great conversation, Marshall.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can see poor Rob's going to be up all day blowing his mind, which leads to my takeaway. In being able to articulate a vision, which hopefully resonates with more people, using illustrative vocabulary has been a key component so that people like Rob, who I work with very closely, won't say, look, I'm not really sure what you said, but it sounds amazing and I got pieces and parts of it. And so it's my favorite question I ever asked Sadhguru, which he laughed for an entire minute of joy, because I asked Sadhguru the first question, and Blaine may have been there on the TV show when I did it. I asked him, Sadhguru, what do you do to dummy down your shit so people understand it? And he laughed and said, nobody's ever asked me that question. And my takeaway was a dummy down version of what I try to teach people, which is, hey man, you are a bag of beliefs. And that bag gives meaning to what you do, say, think, and feel. And if you don't like what you're doing, if you don't like what you're saying, if you don't like what you're thinking, and you don't like what you're feeling, then change the bag of beliefs and find out what belief is in your bag that's causing you to do things that make you feel bad, or say things that make you feel bad, or thinking things that make you feel bad, because feelings are the aggregate of the intelligence, intuition, and inspiration that we've been gifted with, called awareness or enlightenment. And so I love this concept of a bag of beliefs. And I find that a lot of people, as much as I would love to discuss, and there's certain people like Blaine who is well more versed in quantum physics, metaphysics, and physics than I am, and can, capitulate at a vocabulary level of, more than an 8th grader, which I'm at. It's wonderful to be able to articulate and illustrate something as simple as, dude, you are a bag of beliefs. And if you're not doing, saying, thinking, or feeling the way you want, go back into the bag. And guess what? You have your entire control over your bag. You can change your bag any day, any moment, any second, which will change the way you do, say, think, and feel. And I will tell you, my bag of beliefs has changed today in a quick 45 minutes, that everyone showed up for us today, invariably at the right place at the perfect time. And I want to tell you all three of you how grateful I am to share my time with you. And I look forward to sharing more time with all of you. Thank and bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
buddy. Have a
wonderful
great
day.
week, guys.
Go get them, guys. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Keep changing the world. Those are my three friends. Blaine Bartlett, BlaineBartlett.com. Oh, you just lost him there, but that's good. Check him out as well. Rob Gill, check him out, and Marshall Jones. These guys are going to change. I got a quick visitor. He showed up after his jog. We're going to bring him in. Surprise!
Hi, handsome. How are you? Good morning.
You're the closer, man. You know, it's so funny. I had a person drop out, so I just sent out a message, a beacon, and I always wonder who's going to show up from the beacon. Blaine, Rob, Craig all showed up, and it's before 8 o'clock everywhere here in the world. So this is amazing. Mr. Siegel, how was your run this morning?
It was great. I cut it a little short because Nick hit me up, and I wanted to be there for you because that's very important to me because that's what friends do. But it was good. I broke a sweat, connected a little bit, and I'm excited to chop it up with you, even if it's just for 2 to 5 minutes. Best way to start the day. Let's rock.
Yeah, I was going to rock and roll. And I want to bring up a topic that you and I discuss as I get to work with you as well. And you got to connect. We got to get Marshall on the paradigm shift, by the way. So make sure you invite him onto that.
Okay.
How many episodes have we done in a row without missing?
This week will be 123.
123. Wow. And we're at 523 office hours, by the way, without missing. So we're catching up.
You do a couple a week, right?
Yeah. So we're about on track. Yeah, we do. And we have the TV show too, which then catches up another bit. But one of the topics that I thought was interesting, and ever since I talked to you about it, I've been questioning the advice that I gave, or, you know, the understanding is, and I think I was trying to communicate prioritization to you because you're a marathon runner, but you're on a huge mission. And I said to you, hey man, why would you spend that much time training for and running marathons when you could prioritize what you're trying to do more by running half marathons and training for half marathons? And it would literally be half as much time, and you could take that time and apply it to building your brand, your community, empowering people, all the things on your mission. I wanted to get into your head because I wasn't, you know, I'm an ignorant, humble person. I don't know what I don't know. And it sounded mathematically to be good advice, but I've always questioned it because it's your priorities. And I was feeling like maybe I impeded on your priorities and put my priorities on your priorities. And I don't like to do that to my children. And I certainly don't like to do that to guys that I mentor and work with like you. You know, what was your thought process ever since when I gave you that piece of advice?
I remember exactly where we had this conversation. It was at STK in Manhattan. And I appreciate the advice. And you're not wrong, because me and you see eye to eye, not on 100% of it, 100%, but most things. And the reality is I like to say, do a thing, do it well. I don't just do anything just to do it. If I'm doing something, I'm all in. And so when it comes to running marathons and training for those 26.2 mile beasts, there's a lot that goes into that. And if you break it down mathematically, if I'm putting a lot of time into that, somewhere else is being compromised. So you're right. And since we had that conversation, I haven't run a full. In fact, I did run a couple halves, and those were quite lovely.
Yeah, and in recovery too, right? The amount of time it took you to recover from the marathons comparatively to a half marathon.
Yeah. And I will say this, for everyone listening today, I personally think it's so important to have something out there that's not your career, that's an outlet for you to kind of test yourself and be a gladiator in a different arena, whatever that is for you. For me, it's running. Maybe for someone, it's painting or gardening, whatever the case may be. But I think you should have something. Will I run a full again? Probably. But also, I understand that I'm never going to be all in on running because I'm all in on CLS and my fiance. So if I have that running on the side, I'll do that just to kind of like fill my cup in that aspect. But I'm not going to be putting in what it would take for a professional to do that. So right now, I'm good with the halves. The recovery time is better for me. And as you said, it allows me to really double down on what's most important right now, which is my God-sized mission.
Nice. Well, I picked up Blaine because he's still here.
I'm now the third most
So
handsome cat on the show.
Blaine's been
There you
mentoring
go.
people, believe it or not, almost as long as I've been alive, but definitely as long as you've been alive. And so, because of the difference in our age, Blaine, as a world famous mentor, one of the top coaches in the world, World Business Council, but not just in the business realm, in the mindset realm, and all the other things that you've written about. You know, when you're mentoring someone and you give advice, and post haste, you think to yourself, maybe that wasn't the way that I intended it to come across, or maybe it was, you know, an ignorant arrogance that I gave them advice out of my fear for them, not the advice that best suited them. What do you do in the construct of that? Do you call them back, or how do you re-engineer advice that you maybe have second thoughts on?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. Yeah, and that has happened more than once. Yeah, it truly has. First couple of times that I noticed that kind of, honestly, I ignored it. Just kind of let's see how this plays out. But over time, where I've gotten to is I will give less advice and more. And when I do give advice, it really is, I want you to try this. And we're going to talk next week. I want you to let me know how this is landing for you. And we'll course correct from there, but give this a shot. This is my best thinking right now. This is what I got. So I'll take it, play with it. And, you know, you were talking a little bit earlier about this bag of beliefs. One of the things that I'll mention is this is going to rattle some things. You know, you're going to, you know, bump up against a couple of things that you're probably not aware of right now, and treat that as good news. But when we sit back down next week, let's have a conversation about this. Because if it was catalytic, if it actually did something, it will have rattled something in that bag of beliefs.
Yeah,
And
which is it.
Yeah.
Which brings up to me just the final issue, because we got 3 minutes. But I love Marshall Thurber. I've read Social Deviance, you know, to understand how to perturbate people, and it's interesting with the cancel culture, who absolutely is hypersensitive to perturbation, because you can really hurt their feelings, and then have a negative impact on what was supposed to be a positive, constructive piece of criticism, to have a little bit of minor shock therapy to get their ass off the couch and off the screen. You know what I mean? And so Craigie Poo, I perturbate every once in a while, but my favorite thing about it is I've created a space where he feels comfortable, where if I don't utilize perturbation in the correct manner, he feels comfortable saying, hey man, that really hurt my feelings. Like that's not having a positive impact on me. And I just had to let you know, and he's thick skinned. So I know, you know, and different employees, I perturbate different ways. Like my daughter works for me. I do not perturbate my daughter. Colleen is a pleaser, who you coach, Blaine, right? I don't perturbate her. But Justin and Jake and these guys who, you know, they're like, Craig, right? I'll wake them up, and I'm hoping it'll help them expand to where they're at. To that end, this week, Craig made a mistake that I made as well from our coaching session. He wasn't a student of his calendar. And it was funny because he said, hey man, I got to reschedule. I got the time frame screwed up or whatever, Blaine, which you and I do all the time, right? And so I just typed in student of your calendar, but text, and I wanted to bring this up to Marshall, right? Text has no tonal influence. So people, it's a reflection of their tonal understanding. And so if you're insecure about something and you write a factual statement, student of the calendar, because that's the cure to missing things, right? Studying your calendar, then the insecurity or reflection, all of a sudden you may have a detrimental effect on someone with no intention at all, because you cannot use your tonal influence to communicate effectively. And so just to finish up, we're right at the time. Craig, when I put student of the calendar, did you ever need to be offended, or did you take it? Okay,
No,
I
because
figured you did on that one.
there's nothing else to say. It was on me, my team. I'll take full accountability, and you nailed it. And that was it. And I learned from it and move on.
That beautiful. All right, boys, I got to get going. We're here at the National in Chicago. Anybody's around, I'll be doing a meetup in Indianapolis. And we got dinner tonight. We have Angelo Pizzo, the director and screenwriter, producer of Hoosiers, Rudy, The 500, All-American. We have Andre Fluellen coming in. Incredible. Last night here at the National, Marshall Falk, Dan Fleischman, Dickerson's here, Dr. J. We're all around. So just please, guys, come join me. I miss you both. I love you. Marshall, call, reach out. We got 3 shows waiting for you. I see you in the wings. So thanks, guys. Send my love to everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right, real quick, if you want to join our text community, get notified of where we are and when we are, 949-298-2905. Look at that. That's cool. Or email me, david@dmeltzer.com. I want to thank all 3 of my friends. 4 of them, Rob Gill dropped off. Man, we had a crowded show today. Raluca's happy in the background. She cares so much. She was like literally physically upset that we couldn't get this thing rolling. And Marshall saved the day. With much love. We're going to be doing a lot more with him as well. The rest of you guys have been family for years. But remember, most importantly, we got training tomorrow, free Friday training. October will mark 24 years. So I'm catching up to Blaine. And just be more interested than interesting. Be kind to yourself and do good deeds. Have a great day. Seize it. Thanks. Bye.